So this lecture will probably be one of the most relevant ones we have this semester. I know things have been chaotic since COVID. We're going on a year of it now, and I'm sure that's really weighed on everyone's mental health and caused undue stress. I'm hoping that this chapter will help y'all find ways to kind of cope and manage stress. But before we go too far into the chapter, I do want to provide just kind of a content warning. Assault, death, and some other traumatic events will be discussed in this chapter. It may be difficult for some of you to get through, but you will need the information for the exam. So take as much time as you need to move through this lecture. Take as many breaks as you need and put your mental health first. So, in the aftermath of 9/11, there were stories of courageous first responders who risked their lives to save lives. There were also survivors who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. And this brings to question what happens to people who suffer from PTSD. So we're going to be going over different ways people cope with stress and PTSD following a traumatic event. Those at an elevated risk of experiencing traumatic events are young, unmarried, and people of low socioeconomic status. So I know some of you may not be super familiar with that term. Essentially, what it means is those who have low income and or of low social status. So women are more likely to experience sexual assault and child abuse, and men are more likely to experience non-sexual abuse, accidents, disasters, fires, and wartime combat. Interpersonal violence like assault and wartime combat are more likely to cause long-term negative effects than natural disasters. So popular psychology believes those in more urban areas are more likely to experience stressful events than those in rural areas, but that simply isn't true. Stressful events are spread across all sectors of society. Fortunately, exposure to traumatic events does not guarantee that a person will be traumatized for life. However, in the face of traumatic events, most people are resilient. With that being said, if someone needs to seek psychological help after a traumatic experience, that is 100,000% okay. This in no way invalidates how they feel or the trauma and stress they are experiencing. So if you need help, seek help. So stress is the tension, discomfort, or physical symptoms that arise when a situation called a stressor, which is a type of stimulus, strains our ability to cope effectively. A traumatic event is a stressor that's so severe that it can produce long-term psychological or health consequences. The field's way of thinking about stress has changed over the years. So the term stress wasn't even used in psychology until 1944. And when it was used, it was an analogy to the engineering field, in that if the body were like a machine, and machines are subject to wear and tear, then too would be the human body. So there are three approaches to stress. The first is stressors as stimuli. This focuses on identifying different types of stressful events, ranging from job loss to combat. This approach has pinpointed categories of events that most of us find dangerous and unpredictable. As we talked about last lecture, women that experience a lot of stress during pregnancy can deliver 3 to 5 weeks early. In the chapter 10 lecture, my apologies. This approach also identifies the people who are most susceptible to stress following different events. For example, older adults get less stressed out about a breakup than do younger adults. The second approach is stress as response. This approach assesses people's psychological and physical reactions to stressful circumstances. Researchers measure a host of outcome variables after participants are exposed to stressors, either in the lab or in real life. Such variables can include depression, hopelessness, hostility, and physiological reactions like increases in heart rate, and the release of stress hormones called corticosteroids, which activate the body and prepare us to respond to stressful circumstances. So, following 9/11, there was actually a whole host of studies that cropped up examining PTSD and stress and how people responded to the stressful events of 9/11. So, such highly stressful events can exert positive and negative effects on people and communities. As weird as it might sound, most, as in 2/3 to 3/4 of people reported post-traumatic growth, which is a perception of beneficial change or personal transformation in the struggle to overcome adversity. However, researchers found that perceived growth outpaced actual growth following a traumatic event. While some people reinterpret their lives in a positive way following a traumatic event, some do experience profound and enduring personal transformation in the wake of highly aversive events. Research also found that stressful circumstances that touch the lives of an entire community can increase social awareness, cement interpersonal bonds, and enhance a variety of personal characteristics. For example, look at the flooding that happened last year in East Texas and Louisiana. Communities all across both states were sending aid, and members of those communities were using their own boats and resources to help their neighbors. The same thing happened when Hurricane Harvey hit a few years ago, as well as when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. However, the effects of aversive events are often temporary, with most negative after effects seen in those with pre-existing psychological conditions or prior trauma exposure. This is why the military does a psychological screening before you're allowed to join. They need to assess if you are predisposed to develop PTSD from combat exposure. Some ways to dampen the effects of aversive events are engage in pleasurable activities, find purpose in life, and establish and take comfort in close relationships. The third approach is stress as a transaction. Stress is subjective. Not everyone reacts to it in the same way. Some are devastated by breakups, others are optimistic about the opportunity to start anew. Researchers who use this approach examine the interaction between potentially stressful life events and how people interpret and cope with them. Lazarus and colleagues believe that a crucial factor influencing if we experience an event as stressful is our appraisal, which is really just a fancy word for evaluation of it. When we encounter a potentially threatening event, we initially engage in primary appraisal, and this is the initial decision if an event is harmful. Then we make a secondary appraisal, which is perceptions about our ability to cope with an event. When we believe we can't cope, we're more likely to experience a full-blown stress reaction than when we believe we can cope with it. When we're optimistic and think we can achieve our goals, we're especially likely to engage in problem-focused coping, which is a coping strategy in which we problem solve and tackle life's challenges head-on. When situations arise that we can't avoid or we can't control, we're more likely to use emotion-focused coping, which is a coping strategy that features a positive outlook on feelings or situations, accompanied by behaviors that reduce painful emotions. Measuring stress is really difficult because it's very subjective. The best way to think about measuring stress is like measuring pain. I'm sure most of you have probably had your pain measured at one point or another, whether it be from a doctor or a parent, whether it's what's a 1, which is barely any pain, to someone maybe a 5 or a 10 to someone else. Additionally, one event may cause someone extreme distress, while it may not cause any distress to someone else. We've probably all had a moment when we're going through something, and someone close to us told us it's not that big of a deal, when it was a big deal to us. This is why empathy, especially in stressful times like right now during COVID, is really, really important. Because like pain, most people don't have physical manifestations of stress that others can see, and you never really know what someone else is going through. There's a great quote from the late and great Michelle McNamara who is a true crime writer who actually played a major role in finally catching and convicting the Golden State Killer. There's a documentary on Hulu called I'll Be Gone in the Dark about it. Super fascinating if you're into that stuff. And I think the quote fits really well here. The world is chaos. Be kind. So a lot of things can lead to stress. It's been broken down into two categories, which are major life events and hassles. So, adopting the stressors as stimuli approach, Holmes and colleagues developed the Social Readjustment Rating Scale, the first of many efforts to quantify stress and measure it systematically. This is based on 43 life events like jail, personal injury, divorce, etc., ranked in terms of their stressfulness. Studies using this scale found that the number of stressful events someone experienced in the past year is associated with physical disorders. However, the sheer number of stressful events is far from a perfect predictor of who will become physically or psychologically ill. Remember, stress is subjective, and some events are more stressful to one person than another. This approach also did not account for appraisal, coping, resources, and difficulty recalling events accurately. Like, we've all heard the phrase through rose-colored glasses. If you try to remember certain events from your childhood, you're most likely not going to remember them accurately. Additionally, it's a little culturally insensitive in that it ignores discrimination and microaggressions experienced by many people on a daily basis. This approach also neglects the fact that some stressful events, like divorces, can be consequences rather than causes of people's psychological problems. Hassles, on the other hand, are minor annoyances or nuisances that strain our ability to cope, and these often plague our daily lives. While these events by themselves are typically not stressful or not nearly as stressful as a major life event, they can pile up. This is where the phrase, the straw that broke the camel's back, comes into play. We can usually handle multiple hassles every day and be fine, but eventually people will reach their breaking point. Because of this, researchers developed the Hassel Scale to measure how stressful events, ranging from small annoyances to major daily life pressures, impact our adjustment. Hassles and major life events both affect general health, but the frequency and perceived severity of these hassles are actually better predictors of physical health, depression, and anxiety than are major life events. Researchers have questioned if some items on the Hassel scale are actually symptoms of mental illness. For example, some of the items are inability to relax and insomnia, which are both symptoms of anxiety, so those concerns are pretty well founded. Because of this, the developers removed any items related to psychological illness and still found that hassles predict health outcomes. Another approach researchers have considered is that major stressful events are the real culprits because they set us off when we already feel hassled or create hassles with which we need to cope. However, research shows that everyday hassles do contribute to stress. So, Selye, that's spelled S-E-L-Y-E, recognized a connection between the stress-responsive animals, including stomach ulcers, and increases in the size of the adrenal gland, which produces stress hormones, and that of physically ill patients who showed a consistent pattern of stress-related responses. This is why if you're feeling extremely stressed, you might need to take a step back, take a breather, and then restart what you're doing. It's also why if you feel like you can't combat your stress by yourself, to get help from a professional. For anyone feeling overwhelmed or extremely stressed, the university does offer free counseling services. For anyone interested, I have included their branch of the university website. It has their contact information. I believe they're also offering telehealth services, but I could be mistaken about that. So, Selye also believed that too much stress leads to breakdowns. He argued that we're equipped with a sensitive physiology that responds to stressful circumstances by kicking us into high gear. He called this pattern of responding to stress the General Adaptation Syndrome, or GAS. He believed this has 3 stages: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. The alarm reaction is the stage involves excitation of the autonomic nervous system, the discharge of stress hormone adrenaline, and physical symptoms of anxiety. This is based on the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal, or HPA axis. When the hypothalamus receives signals of fear, the sympathetic nervous system activates the adrenal gland, which secretes the stress hormones epinephrine, which is adrenaline, and norepinephrine. This is the system used by our fight or flight response. The second stage is resistance. So after the initial rush of stress hormones, people enter resistance. This is when they adapt to the stressor and find ways to cope with it. This can include reasoning, solving the problem, managing emotions, etc. The third is exhaustion. So if our personal resources are limited and we lack good coping measures, our resistance may ultimately break down, causing our levels of activation to bottom out. The result can range from damage to an organ system to depression and anxiety to a breakdown of the immune system. However, Selye recognized that stress could sometimes be advantageous. He used the term eustress to distinguish from distress. So events that are challenging but not overwhelming can create positive stress and provide opportunities for personal growth. Short-term stress that lasts minutes to hours can also trigger a healthy immune response to help us fend off physical ailments, and this is eustress, not distress. So there are a couple different types of responses people can have in stressful situations, life-threatening events, stuff like that. So the first one you've probably heard of is fight or flight, which is either fight the thing or run away in the opposite direction. But there's one that's less known. It's called tend and befriend. So this is a common reaction to stress, especially among women. This is not to say it's only women that engage in this. Men have the capacity to as well. It's just is more common for women. So this reaction mobilizes people to nurture or tend or seek social support, befriend, under stress. This doesn't mean that women don't engage in fight or flight. They definitely do. It's an evolutionary thing. I don't think it can be written out of our responses anytime soon. However, women do generally have more to lose if they're injured or killed when fighting or fleeing. And this is why, over the course of evolution, women developed the tend and befriend option, which, along with fight or flight, gives them and their offspring a higher chance of survival. So oxytocin is what's known as the bonding hormone. It plays key roles in love, trust, and bonding. It also counters stress and promotes the tend and befriend response. Studies also suggest that oxytocin promotes trust consistent with a tend and befriend response. And then we also have long-lasting stress reactions. So for most of us, life goes on when bad things happen. But others have long-lasting psychological repercussions, including post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD. So PTSD is a condition that sometimes follows stressful events like mass shootings, natural disasters, stuff like that. Its telltale symptoms include vivid memories, feelings, and images of traumatic responses or traumatic experiences, known commonly as flashbacks. Other symptoms include efforts to avoid reminders of the trauma, feelings of detachment or estrangement from others, and symptoms of increased arousal, such as difficulty sleeping or startling easily. The severity, duration, and nearness to the stress all affect the likelihood of developing PTSD.
Alright, so social support is really important for all people just because humans are inherently social creatures. Even the biggest introverts need a social support system. So social support is relationships with peoples, groups, and the larger community that can provide us with emotional comfort and personal and financial resources. So Berkman and Syme conducted a study to examine if social support buffers against the negative effects of stress to protect health outcomes. So they honed in on 4 different kinds of social support, or 4 different kinds of social ties: marriage, contact with friends, church membership, and formal and informal group associations. Then they created a social network index reflecting the number of social ties and social supports available to each person. They found a strong relationship between the number of social connections and the probability of dying. However, this doesn't mean social isolation will kill people. A rival hypothesis is that poor health results from few social bonds, not the other way around. So one study found that poor initial health can't explain why people with the least social support are more likely to die. Fortunately, the positive impact of social support isn't limited to health outcomes. So supportive and caring relationships can help us cope with short-term crises and life transitions and protect against depression even when we encounter major stressors. This is why the end of a personal relationship can be so difficult, because we're losing part of our social support system. So greater social support has also been shown to be correlated with less depression, less anxiety, less distress, more life satisfaction, and higher self-esteem. So following the buffering hypothesis, social support has also been shown to buffer against the negative effects associated with discrimination. So for anyone interested, I will be uploading an article by Steers and colleagues that examines this phenomenon. So another thing that helps us cope with stress is gaining control. So one of the ways we relieve stress is by trying to gain control over the situation. And there are 5 types of control we can use. The first is behavioral control. This is the ability to step up and do something to reduce the impact of a stressful situation or prevent its recurrence. This is a type of active coping called problem-focused coping, and is generally more effective in relieving stress than avoidance-oriented coping, which is avoiding action to solve our problems or just giving up hope, which is commonly called running away from your problems. So research shows that most high school students and college students use problem-focused coping techniques, making them less likely to develop drinking problems. So research has also found that dementia progression is slower in those whose caretakers use problem-focused coping techniques. Next, we have cognitive control. This is the ability to think differently about negative emotions that arise in response to stress-provoking events. This type of control includes emotion-focused coping, which comes in handy when adjusting to uncertain situations or aversive events we can't control or change. So emotion-focused coping here is beneficial in circumstances we can't control. For example, plane hijacking, natural disasters, because in those situations, there's really not a lot of control people can exercise outside of doing what they can to stay alive. Next, we have decisional control. This is the ability to choose among alternative courses of action. For example, we can gain control over the often stressful college experience by consulting with trusted friends about which classes to take and which professors to choose or avoid. For those unfamiliar, I highly suggest just check and rate my professor. Can come in handy. Lost my spot. All right. Next, we have informational control, and this is the ability to acquire information about a stressful event. So knowing what types of questions will be on the LSAT or the GRE or the MCAT can help you better prepare for the exams, possibly lowering the amount of stress you might experience. So under this type of control, we usually engage in proactive coping, which is the anticipation of problems and stressful situations that promotes effective coping. So those who engage in this type of coping tend to view stressful events as opportunities for growth. Next, we have emotional control, and this is the ability to suppress or express emotions. For example, writing in a diary can facilitate emotional control and has a host of actually long-lasting benefits. One study found that those who journaled about their traumatic experience had fewer visits to the health center and showed signs of improved immune functioning. But this also raises the question of, is catharsis a good thing? So catharsis is the disclosing of painful feelings, but it tends to be a double-edged sword. Contrary to the popular belief that talking about our feelings is always beneficial. So when it comes to problem solving and constructive efforts to make troubling events right, it can be beneficial, but when it reinforces a sense of helplessness, it can actually be detrimental. One example of this is us expressing our frustration at something we can't change. So this is concerning because a lot of psychotherapists encourage catharsis. So research shows that engaging in activities that promote catharsis rarely reduce our long-term stress and can actually make anger and anxiety worse in the long run. Some believe catharsis can trigger a vicious cycle in that people become distressed about the fact that they're distressed. So for example, you're anxious about the fact that you're anxious. And anyone who suffers from anxiety and depression might recognize this kind of cycle. You're depressed, you don't have energy to do anything, then you get anxious because you're not doing anything. I can't speak for everyone that has depression and anxiety, but personally I have fallen into that exact cycle more times than I care to admit. So does crisis debriefing help? So recall from chapter 2 that debriefing is talking to people after something has occurred, typically in reference to talking to participants in a study after the study is concluded. So some therapists, especially those employed by first responder services, engage in crisis debriefing, which is designed to ward off PTSD among people exposed to trauma. So crisis debriefing is a single session, usually done in groups, that usually last about 3 to 4 hours. Typically, therapists conduct this procedure within 1 or 2 days of a traumatic event. It proceeds in standardized steps, including encouraging group members to discuss or process their negative emotions, listing the post-traumatic symptoms that group members are likely to experience, and discouraging group members from continuing participation once the session has started. Unfortunately, recent research has shown crisis debriefing isn't really effective for trauma reactions, and it may actually increase the risk of PTSD among people exposed to trauma because it interferes with people's natural coping mechanisms. Come on. There we go. So as I mentioned earlier, people experience stress differently. Because of this, people cope differently as well. So our attitudes, personality, and socialization all shape how we respond to stress and how we cope. So stress-resilient people possess a set of attitudes researchers call hardiness. And this is a set of attitudes marked by a sense of control over events, commitment to life and work, and courage and motivation to confront stressful events. When people are physically ill, they don't usually feel very hardy. Kobasa and Mahdi found that illness creates negative attitudes, not the other way around. So to address the concern of causal direction, they conducted a longitudinal study, and they found that those whose attitudes towards life reflected high levels of control, commitment, and challenge remained healthier than those whose attitudes didn't. So hardiness also boosts stress resistance among nurses in hospice settings, immigrants adjusting to life in the U.S., and military personnel who survive life-threatening events. However, it's still not clear if hardiness or just a general tendency to remain calm under stress are the major predictor of successful coping. So, optimistic people have a rosy outlook and don't dwell on the dark side of life. They expect that good things will happen, and they're likely to cope with problems actively, accept or find ways around the problems they can't solve, and cope proactively with challenges they anticipate. And there are distinct advantages to being optimistic. So compared with pessimists, optimistic people are productive, focused, persistent, and better at handling frustration. Optimism is also associated with a lower mortality rate, a better immune system, low distress in infertile women trying to have kids, lower risk of heart failure, lower risk of depression following a heart attack, better surgical outcomes, and fewer physical complaints. Spirituality is the search for the sacred, which may or may not extend to belief in God. I do want to pause for a second here just to kind of clarify a few things. This applies to any religion, not just monotheistic ones. This also includes those that have pagan or polytheistic beliefs. This also includes anyone that just believes in a higher power of some variety. So it even includes agnostic beliefs. So spiritual and religious beliefs play vital roles in our lives compared to those who consider themselves non-religious. Those who describe themselves as religious have lower mortality rates, improved immune function, lower blood pressure, more adaptive reactions to events such as a spousal loss, and a greater ability to recover from illness. One explanation for these findings is that religious involvements activate a healing energy that scientists can't measure. However, claims that rely on an undetectable force can't be falsified, and therefore are metaphysical and outside the realms of science. Some other potential reasons are as follows. So many religions foster self-control and prohibit risky behaviors, including alcohol, drugs, and unsafe sexual practices. For example, both Mormonism and Islam prohibit drinking. Religious engagement, such as attendance at services, often boosts social support, and shared religious beliefs increases marital satisfaction. A sense of meaning and purpose, control over life, positive emotions, and positive appraisals of stressful situations associated with prayer and religious activities may enhance coping. Bonanno and Burton coined the phrase the fallacy of uniform efficacy to describe the assumption that certain ways of coping and religious regulating emotion are consistently beneficial. Rather, the ability to adjust coping strategies as the situation demands is critical. So, for example, there are many instances where it's more beneficial to mask our feelings. As the saying goes, there's a time and place for everything. Research has shown that those who are better at flexibly controlling their emotions by suppressing or expressing them on demand on a lab task reported less distress. Expending a great deal of effort to suppress and avoid emotions can distract us from problem solving and lead to an unintended consequence, and that would be the emotions may return in full or greater force. The attempt to suppress negative emotions and thoughts associated with aversive events tends to backfire and increase the very negative experiences we're struggling so hard to avoid. And this is why one of the ways to cope with anxiety disorders like obsessive compulsive disorder is to acknowledge your negative feelings, but don't try to avoid them. Additionally, you don't want to marinate in them either. Lastly, we have rumination, which is the correct term for the marination in emotion I just mentioned. So research shows that rumination, which is the recycling negative events in our minds, could lead us to become depressed. Research has also shown that women have much higher rates and more frequent bouts of depression compared with men because they tend to ruminate more than men do. While there are consistent differences between men and women, on average, these differences are small. So one potential explanation is genetic disposition to negative emotions, including depression and anxiety, and another is socialization. So women are socialized to vocalize and express their emotions, especially negative ones, whereas men are socialized to bottle everything up and not talk about their problems. And that is one of the many side effects of toxic masculinity. Additionally, in adolescence, girls are more likely to experience exposure to sexual abuse and greater pressure to conform to gender norms. When this happens, girls may be more likely to dwell on their negative emotions and experience depression. As adults, men are more likely to engage in pleasurable or distracting activities like working, watching football, playing video games, or drinking a lot. And drinking a lot is an unhealthy coping mechanism. Please don't do this. Still, men do ruminate when they're depressed, and men and women alike can benefit from cutting down on rumination and instead confronting their problems head on. So stress impacts our health in a couple different ways. So one of the big ones is the immune system. So to recap from chapter 8, the immune system is our body's defense system against invading bacteria, viruses, and other potentially illness-inducing organisms and substances. Our first shield from foreign invaders is our skin, which blocks the entry of many disease-producing bacteria. So some bacteria do get past our skin, but our immune system has other ways of protecting us. So there are 3 types of white blood cells. There's phagocytes, T cells, and B cells that play prominent roles in the night and day battle to keep us healthy. So phagocytes are the first ones to attack invaders. Substances called cytokines signal T cells to move through the body and attach to proteins on the surface of the virus, destroying them. B cells produce antibodies, which stick to the surface of invaders, slow their progress, and attract other proteins to destroy the foreign organisms. So phagocytes then go through and mop up anything left. They're the cleanup crew. So under ordinary circumstances, the immune system is remarkably effective. But like anything in the human body, it's not perfect. Some major disorders of the immune system, like acquired immune deficiency syndrome, also known as AIDS, are life-threatening. While AIDS is currently incurable, there are highly effective treatments for human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, which then turns into AIDS. On the flip side, when the immune system is overactive, it can lead to autoimmune disorders in which the body attacks itself, and these include arthritis, eczema, and multiple sclerosis. MS, just as a reminder, attacks the melanin on neurons, leading to multiple neurological problems. So, oh boy, psychoneuroimmunology is the study of the relationship between the immune system and the central nervous system. So one of the major pitfalls often seen with the field of study, or with this field of study, is exaggerated claims, which we need to be wary of. So disregarding the exaggerated claims, research has found interesting links between life circumstances and our ability to fight off illness. So many people believe they're more likely to get a cold when they're stressed out, and they're right. That's true. Significant stressors like unemployment and interpersonal difficulties lasting lasting at least a month, predicted who, after exposure to a cold virus, developed a cold. Additionally, a decrease in desirable events and an increase in hassles 4 days prior to a cold are also associated with the onset of a cold, but a network of friends and relatives and close ties to the community seems to afford protection against colds. While stress affects health-related behaviors, it does not have any direct impact on the immune system. For example, when we're stressed, we sleep worse, we eat worse, and smoke and drink more, all of which make us more susceptible to illness. The one that really affects us, though, is the lack of sleep. Research has shown that those who don't get enough sleep are more prone to catching a cold. Research has also found that caring for a family member with Alzheimer's disease, which is a severe form of dementia, could be exceedingly stressful and cause long-term disruption of the immune system. The types of stressors that can impair immune functions include taking an important test, death of a spouse, unemployment, marital conflict. living near a damaged nuclear reactor, natural disasters, early childhood adversity, and the list goes on. The good news, though, is social support can strengthen our immune system. Not too long ago, there was a prominent belief in popular psychology that beliefs in mental states were the root cause of many physical ailments. Certain illnesses or disorders were once called psychosomatic because psychologists believed that deep-seated conflicts and emotional reactions were the culprits. Even today, many people believe stomach ulcers are caused by stress when they're actually caused by the stomach infection from Helicobacter pylori, which are bacteria that live in stomach acid. And overuse or long-term use of NSAIDs like ibuprofen. However, stress may still be a contributing factor by maybe reducing the efficiency of the immune system and increasing vulnerability to the bacterium, or by increasing the likelihood of heavy alcohol consumption, which is a risk factor for stomach ulcers. Psychophysiological is a category of illnesses, such as asthma and ulcers, in which emotions and stress contribute to, maintain, or aggravate the physical condition. Scientists widely acknowledge that emotions and stress are associated with physical disorders, including coronary heart disease, asthma, headaches, and AIDS. This is not a one-directional relationship, though. Physical disease can cause stress as well. Not surprisingly, being diagnosed with a fatal illness or terminal cancer can bring a lot of stress into your life. Conversely, when treatment for severe illness is successful, people are then faced with several decisions like should they go back to work, should they begin new relationships or end old ones. One example of this is one of my best friend's moms. She almost died because she got an infection while in the hospital. Thankfully, she made a full recovery, but that experience definitely changed her. And once her kids were both out of the house, or were both out of high school, her and her husband got a divorce. And I'm not passing judgment on her. She did what was best for her. So I just wanted to provide an example of this happening to someone. Even healthy people become convinced they're seriously ill. In fact, just believing you're sick can cause serious distress. You ever try to Google or WebMD your symptoms? It'll tell you cancer almost every time. One example is Morgellons disease, which people believe they had bugs or parasites crawling in their skin. It gives me the heebie-jeebies even thinking about it. And the CDC examined those experiencing symptoms and found no foreign bodies. This finding was supported with research done by the Mayo Clinic as well. Interestingly, these patients were extremely resistant to suggestions by physicians that they did not have a parasite. The Mayo Clinic called this delusional infestation, meaning patients falsely believed that they were infested by parasites. They also found that despite no actual physical symptoms, imagined illness can still be extremely stressful. Most psychologists have adopted a biopsychosocial perspective, which is a view of illness or medical condition, or a view that an illness or medical condition is the product of interplay of biological, psychological, and social factors. A lot of physical illnesses rely on the interplay of genes, lifestyle, immunity, social support, everyday stressors, and self-perceptions. Another way stress can affect us is coronary heart disease. So scientists have learned that psychological factors, including stress and personality traits, are risk factors for coronary heart disease, which will be abbreviated CHD. And this is the complete or partial blockage of arteries that provide oxygen to the heart and is the #1 cause of death and disability in the United States. It develops when deposits of cholesterol collect in the walls of arteries, narrowing and blocking the coronary arteries, creating a condition called atherosclerosis. If this worsens, it can lead to chest pain and deterioration and death of heart tissue, otherwise known as a heart attack. So I want to pause here and tell you guys the signs of a heart attack. I know most of you are young, probably somewhere between 18 and 24, but I want to tell y'all this because it might help with parents or grandparents. So just a little personal story time. My dad was in the hospital for about a week last semester because my mom thought he was having a heart attack. Thankfully, it wasn't. But they did find he had a very low heart rate, which could be fatal if left untreated. So while these symptoms may not really play a role in your life, it could make a difference for your parents or grandparents. And I know this doesn't specifically relate to psychology, but I do think it's important information to have. So for women, the symptoms include jaw pain, shortness of breath, chest tightness or discomfort, backache, and extreme fatigue and nausea. For men, they include sweating, chest pain or tightness, heartburn, nausea or vomiting. Another common symptom is pain in the left arm. So the more you know. So the role of stress in CHD. So many risk factors are associated with CHD, including a history of smoking, high cholesterol, and high blood pressure, family history of CHD, diabetes, and low levels of vitamin D can boost the risk of heart disease. So stress deserves a place in this list of risk factors as well because stressful life events predict recurrences of heart attack, high blood pressure, and enlargement of the heart. Even accounting for depression, research has found that PTSD is a predictor of CHD as well. And while this data is only correlational, it does help us better understand the relationship between stress and health than we would without these findings. Additionally, high levels of stress hormones triggered by extreme stress can lead to disruption in normal heart rhythm and even sudden death, as well as atherosclerosis in those who are highly reactive to daily stressors. And those with CHD also have hyperactive autonomic nervous systems with higher heart rates and extreme responses to physical stress. While stress may not be a direct predictor of CHD, it does influence risk factors of CHD, like poor diet and lack of exercise. And personality plays a role in CHD as well. So in addition to stress, researchers have suggested that long-standing behavior patterns contribute to the risk of CHD. Friedman and Rosenman coined the term type A personality, which is a personality type that describes people who are competitive, driven, hostile, and ambitious. These kinds of people are often portrayed as uptight and or anxious in the media. They also observed that their CHD participants were restless in the waiting room. Friedman and Rosenman also identified additional characteristics that clustered under the type A description: perfectionist, prone to hostility, stubborn, opinionated, cynical, controlling, and concerned with deadlines. Of all type A characteristics, hostility seemed to be the best predictor of heart disease because hostility is associated with well-documented risk factors for CHD, like alcohol consumption, smoking, and weight gain. On the bright side, though, openness to experience, tendencies to tamper down hostility, practice forgiveness of others, and seek social support help reduce the risk of CHD. So, hostility and other negative emotions don't always arise from enduring personality traits. Negative emotions can stem from many pressures and demands we confront in our fast-paced lifestyles, or fast-paced society. So, even a significant drop in income produces a 30% increase in the risk of dying from coronary heart disease, and CHD is associated with substantial job stress and dissatisfaction. This is why, during times of great stress, it's really important to look inward and take care of yourself, even if that just means watching a show you like one night a week. Additionally, African American women who report discrimination, unfair treatment, and high stress levels have more narrowing and blockage of their arteries than do African American women, or than do other African American women. However, it's possible that the causal arrow is reversed. Maybe CHD causes job stress in some people, a possibility that scientists have yet to examine in depth. Another hypothesis is that a third variable, like personality, attitudes towards others, or early experiences with trauma contribute to job stress and CHD. Even though there is a strong link between poverty or low socioeconomic status, abbreviated as SES, and poor health, we still need to know what's responsible for this association. One explanation is that life can be immensely challenging for people who have little education, struggle in a bad job with a nasty supervisor, and barely make enough money to make ends meet. These factors drain emotional and physical resources, which decreases the ability to cope, which can lead to depression, hopelessness, feelings of loss of control, and hostility, which all increase the risk of poor health and CHD. Another factor I feel like needs to be discussed is food deserts. And this is where there's a lack of proper groceries or grocery stores in a given geographic area, typically in low-income neighborhoods. Without food that has the proper nutrients, of course people are going to have poorer health than those who have access to those groceries. The map I have here shows food deserts across the country, and if you look, the highest rates of food deserts are throughout the South. The areas over in Arizona and Nevada actually kind of correspond to Native American reservations. So, yeah, this is an issue, and I feel like it doesn't really get addressed enough. So if we could eliminate all stress from our lives, the positive shift in health would be enormous. Stress has a risk factor for a lot of behaviors like smoking and drinking, which are in and of themselves risk factors for poor health. So health psychology is a field of psychology, also called behavioral medicine, that integrates the behavioral sciences with the practice of medicine. Health psychologists also combine education and psychological interventions, I can't talk today, to promote and maintain health and to prevent and treat illness. Health psychologists work in hospitals, rehab centers, medical schools, industry, government agencies, and academic and research settings. Interventions developed within health psychology include teaching patients stress management skills, pain reduction techniques, and helping people to mobilize social support, comply with medical regimens, and pursue healthy lifestyles. We actually used to have a couple professors in the psychology department that focused on cross-cultural health psychology and smoking cessation. One of the main studies they performed was trying to get Mexican Americans and Mexicans, both living on the Texas-Mexico border, to quit smoking. Unfortunately, I couldn't find their joint effort, but I did find the paper by Dr. Paul Romanowicz, and I will be uploading it with the lecture slides for anyone that wants to really get a deeper look at this. So health psychologists help patients break out of unhealthy habits like smoking, excessive drinking, poor diet. These behaviors can be triggered by stress and can be maintained when these activities reduce stress. When we engage in unhealthy behaviors that reduce stress in the short run, we place ourselves at risk of health and stress-related problems in the long run. Next, we'll cover ways to kind of counteract these negative choices and promote health. So the first is stop smoking. So smoking and exposure to secondhand smoke rank as the leading cause of preventable disease and death worldwide. A 30 to 40-year-old male cigarette smoker with a 2-pack-a-day habit loses about 8 years of his life on average. Smoking is responsible for 25% of all preventable cancers and is the primary cause of lung disease among both men and women. Those who smoke hookah or shisha, which is smoking flavored tobacco through a water pipe, are not immune from the harmful effects of tobacco. Inhaled water pipe smoke is at least as toxic as cigarette smoke, according to research done in 2005 and 2010. Electronic cigarettes, or e-cigs, are becoming very popular. E-cigarettes are used as substitutes for traditional cigarettes to help individuals stop smoking because the amount of nicotine can be adjusted so the person can theoretically wean themselves off of nicotine altogether. While marketers say these are good for smoking cessation, these claims have not been substantiated by replicated findings yet. If you do use e-cigarettes, do so with caution, and it's recommended not to use them for long term. So most individuals, about 2/3 to 3/4, who try to quit smoking cold turkey are successful, but about 3 to 5% who try to quit unaided are unsuccessful. Because of this, health psychologists make smoking cessation and prevention their main priority. Each time people try to quit smoking, their chances of being successful increase. Those who quit before 40 reduce their chance of premature death by 90%. If you are a smoker, don't quit trying to quit. The second is curb alcohol consumption. So repeated bouts of heavy drinking, especially heavy episodic drinking or binge drinking, which is defined as 5 or more drinks on one occasion for men and 4 or more drinks on one occasion for women, is associated with increases in many types of cancer, serious and sometimes fatal liver problems, pregnancy complications, brain shrinkage, and neurological problems. Several controversial studies suggest that light to moderate drinking, defined as 2 drinks per day for men, 1 drink per day for women, lessen the risk of heart disease and stroke and are associated with lower mortality rates. However, a rival explanation for these findings is that people who drink only moderate amounts of alcohol, such as wine, also may have higher incomes and healthier lifestyles compared with people who either abstained from drinking or drank more than 2 drinks in one sitting. Additionally, the benefits of moderate drinking may have been overestimated in some studies because they lumped people who never drank with former drinkers. Doing this erases the health problems former drinkers may have experienced that never drinkers might not have. Other studies accounted for this and did not find evidence for the reduced risk of mortality for the moderate drinkers. Another hypothesis is that people who abstain are in poorer health to begin with than are light or moderate drinkers. Systematic reviews of studies comparing drinkers with non-drinkers who abstained because they chose to do so found no health differences between drinkers and non-drinkers. At this time, we can't be totally sure that any amount of alcohol is like 100% safe, much less actually good for our health. However, one thing is certain, drinking heavily is associated with a heightened risk of cardiovascular disease. Fortunately, many of the negative effects of alcohol, including changes in the brain, can be reversed or minimized when we abstain from drinking. Third is achieving a healthy weight. So here's another trigger or content or both warning. I'm going with trigger warning. This time for anyone who previously has or currently is suffering from an eating disorder. You will need this information for the exam, but again, take as much time as you need, take breaks, take care of yourself. Unfortunately, many estimates of weight and health are based off the body mass index or BMI, which is not totally accurate. It's a decent framework to operate within, but there are issues with it. The main one being that it was developed in the 19th century, for people who are bad with century numbers like myself, that's the 1800s, and is still treated as a gold standard for weight and health. Better methods should have been developed by now, especially considering all of the advances society has made in regards to healthcare and quality of life. Surgical procedures and medical procedures have made leaps and bounds since the 1800s, so why has this not been improved upon? And just to reiterate, quick refresher, a gold standard in research is the best tool to measure something with. For example, the Beck Depression Inventory is considered one of the gold standards for measuring depression. With that being said, those that are bigger or overweight are more likely to develop chronic illnesses. Additionally, those with more fat around their abdomen are at a higher risk of inflammation-related disorders like arthritis or diabetes than those with fat distributed more evenly. Unfortunately, overweight individuals suffer from a variety of social and emotional problems too. Chubby kids are teased at school, overweight adults are often discriminated against in the workplace and social arena. Yes, fat phobia is real, and this is supported by multiple research studies. Overweight people are 25% more likely to suffer from depression or an anxiety disorder. Fat phobia and disdain for fat people runs so deep in society that 46% of people said they'd rather give up a year of their life than be overweight. And 30% would rather be divorced. Just let that sink in for a second. So, tips for achieving a healthy weight. Here's some simple yet scientifically supported advice to follow for controlling weight and eating a healthy diet. So exercise regularly, stop smoking and drinking excessively, sleep at least 8 hours a night, cut down on TV time, monitor total calories and body weight, eat food with good fats like avocados and fish oils to protect against and lower risk of heart disease. Limit intake of potato chips, sugary beverages, unprocessed red meats, and processed meats, and eat more veggies, whole grains, nuts, yogurt, and fruit. Get help from your social network to support your efforts to lose weight. Control portion size. And here are some things to avoid because they are not scientifically supported and could potentially be harmful to yourself and your weight loss or your ability to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Detox and cleanse diets. Your body does this naturally. That's why you have a liver. Diet pills. These are basically just caffeine pills. That's why they make you so jittery. Drink a coffee. Crash or fad diets. These might help you lose weight rapidly, but they are not long-term solutions, and you will most likely gain the weight back. Right, and then the fourth potential step you can take toward a healthy lifestyle is exercise. Jogging, swimming, cycling, and other regular aerobic exercises, or exercises that promote the use of oxygen in the body, can lower blood pressure and risk of CHD, improve lung function, relieve symptoms of arthritis, decrease the risk of diabetes, and cut the risk of breast and colon cancer. Contrary to the popular belief, no pain, no gain is actually not accurate. Exercise doesn't have to be vigorous. In fact, 30 minutes of activity on most days of the week, including gardening, vacuuming, cleaning the bathroom, can lead to improved fitness and health. Although moderate exercise, like brisk walking, can reap health benefits, including improved cognitive function in older adults, and perhaps even the growth of neurons, more sustained and vigorous exercise is typically needed to reach our fitness potential and live longer. But changing lifestyles is easier said than done. As many as 30 to 70% of patients don't take their physician's medical advice, and as many as 80% don't follow their physician's recommendations to exercise, stop smoking, change their diet, or take prescribed medications. One reason for this non-compliance is that it's difficult to overcome personal inertia, which is our reluctance to try something new. Many self-destructive habits relieve stress and don't create an imminent health threat, so it's easy for us to just let things be. Another reason we maintain our status quo is that we underestimate certain risks to our health and overestimate others. Because the news media provides more instances of violent deaths, our availability heuristic makes us believe that we're more likely to die in a violent death than from chronic illness like heart disease or diabetes. Some people feel powerless to change, possibly because their habits are so deeply ingrained. Because modifying such deeply entrenched behaviors can be difficult, we're best off not developing them in the first place. So prevention efforts should begin in adolescence, if not earlier, because the earlier in life we develop unhealthy habits, the more likely they'll create problems like alcohol abuse for us later in life. Health psychologists have developed prevention programs that contain the following elements. Educating young people about the risks and negative consequences of obesity, smoking, and excessive drinking, as well as positive health behaviors such as good nutrition and the importance of exercise. Teaching young people to recognize and resist peer pressure to engage in unhealthy behaviors, so resisting peer pressure to like smoke or drink or something of that nature. Exposing young people to positive role models who don't drink or smoke. Teaching effective coping skills for daily living and dealing with stressful life events. And not all prevention efforts are successful. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with the DARE program, which is the Drug Abuse Resistance Education that's used in schools nationwide to teach students how to avoid getting into drugs, gangs, and violent activities. It emphasizes the negative aspects of excessive drinking and substance abuse and the positive aspects of self-esteem and healthy life choices. While this program is really popular with administrators, like we had to sit through the program every single year from like junior high through high school. Like, at least I did. I don't know about you guys. Research has found that it doesn't really produce long-term effects on substance abuse or boost self-esteem. Programs that focus on using coping skills and managing stress generally show better treatment and prevention outcomes. Alright, so I'm going to preface this section just by saying a lot of these I will give credence because I know they do help some people, but I have a bone to pick with homeopathic medicine, so let's get into it. So alternative medicine is healthcare practices and products used in place of conventional medicine. So complementary medicine or integrative health medicine is healthcare practices and products used together with conventional medicine. What unites these is the fact that they haven't been shown to be safe and effective using scientific standards. So the first type is biologically based therapies. These include vitamins, herbs, and food supplements. Contrary to popular belief, scientific findings suggest that St. John's wort does not alleviate symptoms of depression, or symptoms of moderate to severe depression. Shark cartilage can't cure cancer. Glucosamine and chondroitin don't relieve mild arthritis pain. Acai berries don't improve sexual performance, increase energy, or aid in digestion or weight loss. Extract from the leaves of the ginkgo biloba tree doesn't slow cognitive decline in aging as adults, prevent Alzheimer's, or reduce heart attacks or strokes. Many vitamins and dietary supplements haven't really fared well in research either. For example, dietary supplements with calcium don't really prevent bone loss or increase bone density substantially in postmenopausal women, and iron supplements taken to prevent disease are associated with greater risk of death among women. The USDA carefully regulates most medicines, but because of some legislation passed in 1999, it no longer monitors the safety, purity, or effectiveness of herbs, vitamins, or dietary supplements. Additionally, these substances aren't monitored by the FDA either, so there's no guarantee they even contain what they claim to contain. Also, little known fact, if a supplement makes a claim that their product helps you lose weight, or it'll help with arthritis, they can't make those claims without testing their product in a lab against a placebo and a control group. Now, if they use anecdotal evidence, like Jane lost X amount of weight, and it's like, okay, that's anecdotal. They're not saying their product did it. They're just saying she lost weight. If they haven't tested it and make those claims, the FDA can actually come after them because at that point they're entering medicine territory instead of dietary supplement territory. The next kind is manipulative and body-based methods. So one example of this is chiropractic practice. Oh, try saying that 10 times fast. The main body-based method is chiropractic manipulation. So chiropractors manipulate the spine to treat a wide range of pain-related conditions and injuries, often provide nutrition and lifestyle counseling. So unlike medical doctors, chiropractors can't perform surgeries or prescribe medicine. Historically, chiropractic medicine was based on the now discredited idea that irregularities in the alignment of the spine prevent nervous and immune systems from functioning properly. While chiropractic approaches can sometimes be helpful, they're not necessarily better than standard approaches, including exercise, general practitioner care, pain relievers, and physical therapy. Additionally, there's no evidence that these procedures can treat diseases that aren't associated with back problems, even though they're frequently used for those purposes. Still, some people may benefit from the attention, support, and advice they receive from chiropractors, which may relieve stress and create a strong placebo effect. Also, I don't know about y'all, but cracking or popping my back always makes me feel a little bit better. Even if it is just a placebo effect, it always makes me feel a little better. The next kind is mind-body medicine. So this includes biofeedback, meditation, and yoga. Biofeedback is feedback by a device that provides almost an immediate output of a biological function, such as heart rate or skin temperature. Over time, some patients can learn to use this feedback to change their physiological responses associated with stress or illness. Health psychologists have raised questions about if biofeedback yields beneficial effects beyond the relaxation associated with sitting quietly. In fact, relaxation training and biofeedback are about equally effective in reducing stress and treating anxiety, insomnia, and the side effects associated with cancer chemotherapy. Meditation is a variety of practices that train attention and awareness. Meditative practices are embedded in many world religions and integrated into the lives of people of all races and creeds. In Western countries, people typically relax to achieve stress reduction, but in non-Western countries, people typically practice meditation to achieve insight or spiritual growth. So, contrary to popular belief, there is no right or wrong way to meditate. It can include focusing attention on the breath, a flame, feelings of compassion towards all living things, or whatever comes to mind in the moment. So for centuries, meditation fell well outside the popular culture in the scientific mainstream, but it is making a comeback. When scientists first turned their attention to meditation, they identified a wide range of positive effects, including heightened creativity, empathy, alertness, compassionate response to suffering, and self-esteem. Clinicians have added meditative techniques to a variety of psychotherapies and have used them with some success in treating pain and numerous medical conditions. A lot of people seem to benefit from meditation, but it's not quite clear why. Its positive effects may derive from a greater acceptance of our troubling thoughts and feelings. They may also derive not from meditation itself, but from sitting quietly, resting, and relaxing with your eyes closed. People's positive attitudes and expectancies about meditation may also account for why it's beneficial. Yoga, which are physical, mental, and spiritual practices that include postures, meditation, breathing techniques, mental concentration, visualization, or guided imagery, and relaxation exercises. Yoga might be helpful in reducing anxiety and depression, migraines, pain, and pain-associated disability. Nevertheless, researchers have conducted few controlled studies, so the jury's kind of still out on if yoga is more effective than some simpler procedures of relaxation and other types of exercise. Next, we have energy medicine. And these are increasingly popular and based on the idea that disruptions in our body's energy field can be mapped and treated. This is especially popular in non-Western societies, especially regarding acupuncture. So acupuncture is an ancient Chinese practice of inserting thin needles in the body to alter energy forces believed to run through the body. Acupuncturists claim to relieve blockages of qi by applying needles or electrical, laser, or heat stimulation to one or more of 2,000 points on the body. Acupuncture can help relieve nausea following surgical operations and treat pain-related conditions, but there's not a whole lot of reason to believe that its positive effects are due to energy changes. Whole medicine systems and homeopathy. So homeopathic medicines are remedies that feature a small dose of an illness-inducing substance to activate the body's own natural defenses. The YouTube video I've attached here really captures all you need to know about how I feel about homeopathy. And that's baloney. I know sometimes it won't load the actual video in the lectures, so I have a picture here that captures the scene. So one important distinction to make here is vaccines are not technically homeopathic medicine, because homeopathic medicine relies purely on natural remedies like herbs and roots and does not use traditional medicine. There's also a difference between holistic medicine and homeopathic medicine. This actually came up because my aunt uses a holistic doctor, and I was curious about the difference. So holistic medicine employs the use of natural remedies when possible, but will still employ traditional medicine when natural cures won't suffice. For example, drinking chamomile tea to help people sleep, but still prescribing antibiotics for infections. Alright, so most of these procedures have been found to be less effective than placebos. Remember, if they don't work better than a placebo, there's no point in spending money on them. Additionally, placebo is a simpler explanation than many of these methods. A lot of these treatments have little or no scientific support, yet they remain popular. In addition to placebo effects, there are 4 probable reasons for the apparent effectiveness of some of these unsupported treatments. So the first is people may assume that natural products like herbs and megavitamins improve their health because they perceive no adverse effects to counter this belief. The symptom of many physical disorders come and go, so consumers may attribute symptom relief to treatment rather than to changes in the natural course of the illness. When these treatments accompany conventional treatments, many people may attribute their improvement to these rather than to the less dramatic or interesting conventional treatment. The problem may be misdiagnosed in the first place, so the condition isn't as severe as initially believed. And of course, this leads to the inevitable question of should you or should you not use these? So, considering a lot of these haven't been very thoroughly tested, it's best to approach with caution and just use your best judgment. Like I said, I know people swear by some of these, and I can't tell you absolutely yes or no, so go with your gut. Make sure the place is clean and proper sterilization is being used nowadays. Make sure everyone is social distancing, but just overall, go with your gut. If you've used some of these and you swear by them, okay, awesome, great. Like I said, I will give most of these credence because I do know that they tend to work for people, even if there's not a whole lot of scientific evidence supporting them. Except homeopathic medicine. I will never let that one go. I will die on that hill.